The Ramayana. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit of Valmiki. Edited and published by Manmatha Nath Dutt, 1891. Ramayana. Ayodhya Kanda. Section 75. Arising after a while while, when he had regained his consciousness, Bharata, endowed with prowess, regarding his distressed mother with eyes filled with tears, began to tax her in the midst of the courtiers. I had never desired the kingdom. I had never consulted my mother. Nor did I know the installation that had been thought of by the monarch. I was then living in a far country in company with Satrughna. I did not know the banishment of the magnanimous Rama to the woods, or the exile of Sumitra's son, nor did I know how Sita came to be banished. As the high-souled Bharata was thus wailing, Kausalya, recognizing his voice, spoke unto Sumitra, "Come is Bharata, the son of that one of crooked ways. I am desirous of seeing the far-sighted Bharata." Having said this unto Sumitra, that one emaciated and with a pallid countenance, trembling and almost deprived of sensation, went to where Bharata was. And it came to pass that the king's son, Bharata, along with Satrughna, had just then by the way that led to the same, been proceeding to Kausalya's quarter. Then Satrughna and Bharata, seeing the aggrieved Kausalya, embraced the stricken and fallen lady, well nigh deprived of her senses. Thereupon, weeping from grief, the noble and intelligent Kausalya, exceedingly afflicted, embracing them as they indulged in sorrow, said unto Bharata, "Thus hast thou, that hadst desired the kingdom, received it rid of its thorn. Alas! It has been speedily obtained through the crooked act of Kaikeyi. What is the good that is perceived by Kaikeyi of tortuous sight in sending away my son clad in bark to the woods? It behoveth Kaikeyi to send me also speedily to where is staying my illustrious son, furnished with a gold gleaming navel. Or first performing the fire sacrifice, I, followed by Sumitra, will myself happily seek the way by which Raghava has gone to the woods. Or it behoveth thee to thyself bring me unto the place where that foremost of men, my son, is performing austerities. This spacious kingdom, abounding in corn and wealth, and filled with elephants, horses, and cars, is thine, having been conferred on thee by Kaikeyi." Thus reproached by many a harsh word, the sinless Bharata felt exceeding pain like unto that produced by pricking a sore with a needle. Exceedingly agitated, he fell at Kausalya's feet, lamenting much, and well nigh deprived of his senses. Bharata then regained his consciousness, and with joined hands answered Kausalya, lamenting thus and overcome with excess of sorrow, saying, "O noble lady, what for dost thou censure me, who am without sin and who know nothing of this? Thou knowest that profuse is my delight in Raghava. May the sense of him never follow scripture, that had approved the exile into the woods of that foremost of the good, the noble Rama, intent on truth. May such a person as had approved the exile unto the woods of the noble one undergo servitude at the hands of the sinful, answer the calls of nature facing the sun, and kick a sleeping cow with his feet. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one into the woods come by the sin that is reaped by a master who withholds salary from servants after the ceremony is over. May that one that had approved the exile of the noble Rama to the woods, be guilty of the sin that is his, that injures a sovereign engaged in ruling his subjects like sons. May the person that had approved the exile of the noble one to the woods, reap the sin of his, that having taken a sixth part of their incomes, does not protect his subjects. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one to the woods, come by the demerit that is his that denies the kshimas unto ascetics in a sacrifice, after having promised them the same. May he that had approved the exile into the woods of the noble one, never discharged the duty of the good in the field thronged with elephants and horses and cars, and bristling with arms. May the wicked wight that had approved the exile of the noble one to the woods bring to naught the subtle scriptural knowledge which has been carefully taught him by his intelligent preceptor. May that one that had approved the exile of the noble Rama to the woods never behold the long-armed and broad-shouldered Raghava, resembling the sun and the moon in energy seated on the throne. May that one void of aversion, that had approved of the exile of the noble one to the woods feed on payak, krisra, and goat's flesh, which have not been offered in sacrifice. And may he insult his spiritual preceptor. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one to the woods touch a cow with his feet, revile his superiors, and injure his friends. May that one of wicked soul that had approved of the exile of the noble one into the woods divulge any defects of another's character that have been communicated to him in strict confidence. May he that had approved the exile of Rama to the woods, never repay any good act, be ungrateful, abandoned by all, the object of universal execration. May he that had approved of the exile into the woods of the noble one, eat alone in his home, although surrounded by sons and wives and servitors. May he that had approved of the exile of the noble one, die without obtaining wives worthy of him, without sons, without any good works performed. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one into the woods, never see his own offspring, and not attaining ripe age. May he mourn his wives. And may he come by the sin that is reaped by slaying a king, a woman, a boy, or an old man, or by renouncing those who have claims on his maintenance. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one into the woods always feed his family with lac, honey, meat, iron, and poison. May that one that had approved the exile of the noble one into the woods, while flying from the engagement while it is waxing furious with the foe, come to be killed. May he that had approved of the exile of the noble one into the woods, clad in tatters with a skull in hand, like a madman range the earth a-begging. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one into the woods, be always addicted to wine, to women, and to dice, and may he be swayed by lust, anger. May he that had approved of the exile of that noble one into the woods, never relish virtue, and go after unrighteousness. And may he shower his wealth on the unworthy. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one into the woods, have his various accumulated riches by thousands carried off by robbers. May he that had approved of the exile into the woods of that noble one, come by the demerit that is his who sleepeth during both the twilights. May he reap the sin that is reaped by an incendiary, or him that lieth with his preceptor's wife, or him that wrongs his friend. May he that had approved the exile of that noble one into the woods, never serve the gods or the manes of the ancestors or his father and mother. May he that had approved the exile of that noble one into the woods, be speedily shut out from the world of the good, from their fame, and from their acts. May he that had approved the exile of that long-armed and broad-breasted one, renouncing the ministration of his mother, turn his thoughts to evil. May he that had approved the exile of the noble one, becoming impoverished yet having to support a large family, and suffering from fever, be always miserable. May he that had approved the exile of that noble one render fruitless the hopes of poor people cherishing them and looking up wistfully. May he that had approved the exile into the woods of the noble one remaining always wicked, cruel, and impure, leading an unrighteous life and being in continual fear of his sovereign, maintain himself by deceit forever and a day. May that wicked person that had approved the exile into the woods of the noble one disregard his just wife remaining near, after she has performed her ablutions at the end of her season. May his that had approved the banishment into the woods of that noble one be the sin that is incurred by a Brahmana that has rendered himself sunless. May that one of befouled senses that had approved of the exile into the woods of that noble one disturb the worship of Brahmana and milch a cow that has a calf. May that foolish person that had approved the exile of that noble one forsaking all pleasure in virtue, seek others' wives, renouncing his own wedded with sacred rites. May he that had approved the exile into the woods of that noble one come by the sin that attaches to a wine bibber or one that administers poison to another. May he that had approved of the exile into the woods of the noble one bear the sin that is his that serves a thirsty soul with deceit. May he that had approved the exile into the woods of that noble one reap the demerit of them that from devotion to their respective faiths wrangle from their own points of view, as well as that of them that listen to the disputation. Having thus consoled Kausalya bereft of her son and husband, the prince afflicted with distress fell down. Then Kausalya addressed the aggrieved Bharata well nigh deprived of his senses, swearing strong oaths, saying, O son, it grieves me more that thou art afflicting my heart by taking oaths. Lucky it is that graced with auspicious marks, thou swervest not from virtue, my child, for this reason thou wilt attain the regions of pious persons. Saying this, Kausalya overpowered with emotion, drawing into her lap Bharata attached to his brother, and embracing the mighty armed one, gave way to grief. And bewailing thus, the mind of the high-souled Bharata wrought with sorrow, was overcome with the burden of grief, and fallen on the ground, lamenting, senseless, with his intellect overpowered, and momentarily heaving sighs, Bharata passed away night in grief. Section 76. As Bharata, the son of Kaikeyi was thus burning in grief, that foremost of those skilled in speech, the saint Vasishtha, endowed with excellence of language, said, Do not weep, good betide thee, O illustrious prince. Do thou perform the funeral rites of the departed king. Hearing Vasishtha's words, Bharata, cognizant of duty, bowed down to the ground and dispatched the ministers for performing the last rites. And raising from under the oil the body of the king with a sallow countenance, and appearing to be asleep, Bharata placed it on the ground upon a couch in front adorned with various gems. Thereupon honoring his words by saying, So be it, he urged speed upon all the Ritvigas, priests, and acharyas. And then those that had brought the king's corpse outside from the fire chamber, instructed by the Ritvigas and priests, according to the ordinance, began to offer oblations into the fire. Thereupon honoring his words by saying, So be it, he urged speed upon all the Ritvigas, priests, and acharyas. And then those that had brought the king's corpse outside from the fire chamber, instructed by the Ritvigas and priests, according to the ordinance, began to offer oblations into the fire. Next, placing the king deprived of life on a cart, the servants with their throats oppressed with vapor and with their minds weighed down with dejection carried him, and scattering gold and silver and various kinds of cloth, on the way, people went in front of the king. Others procuring sandal, aguru and other resinous incenses, sarla, padmaka and devdaru, cast it on the earth. And drawing near the king there, Ritvikas laid various other fragrant substances on the funeral pile. Then offering oblations into the fire, the Ritvikas began to recite japa, and as laid down in the scriptures, Sama singers chanted Samas. And by means of litters and other conveyances, each mounted according to her rank, the wives of the king went out from the city, surrounded by aged men. And Ritvijas went round the corpse of the king, who performed many sacrifices, leaving it on the left side. And kindling with grief, the females, also headed by Kausalya, circumambulated the pyre. And then there was heard the wail of women distressed with grief, weeping piteously by thousands like unto crunchies, weeping again and again with their sense lost. The wives of the king alighted from the car on the banks of the Sarayu. Having performed the watery rites, the wives of the monarch as well as the councillors and priests, in company with Bharata, entering the city with tears in their eyes, spent 10 days in mourning, lying down on the ground. Section 77. When the 10 days had gone by, the king's son, his uncleanness, consequent on the demise of his father, removed, performed the Shraddha on the 12th day, on the occasion of the ceremonies for the welfare of the departed spirit. The son of the king conferred on Brahmanas wealth and gems, and rice in abundance, and herds of goats, and silver in profusion, and countless kin, and maidservants and manservants, and vehicles and spacious mansions. And on the 13th day, the long-armed Bharata, overwhelmed with grief, burst into lamentation. And coming to the foot of the funeral pyre for gathering the bones of the departed, he, overcome with grief, with his throat obstructed with the sounds of lamentation, said, "My father, on brother Rama, to whom I had been consigned by thee, having gone to the forest, I have been cast by thee into vacancy. My father, forsaking forlorn mother Kausalya, whose stay her son had gone to the forest, where hast thou gone, O king?" And seeing the spot where lay the bones of his father, mixed with ashes and embers, Bharata, looking at the place where occurred the dissolution of his father's frame, carried away by emotion, indulged in sorrow. And seeing this, he, exceedingly distressed, crying, fell down to the ground. And raised up by others, he looked like an uplifted banner of Sakra bound to an engine. And his counsellors rushed towards that one of pure woes, like the saints making towards Jyoti as he was falling on the extinction of his merit. Seeing Bharata plunged in grief, Satrughna, remembering the king, fell down to the ground deprived of consciousness, and devoid of sense, and like a madman, he in grief of heart began to lament, remembering all the virtues of his father again and again. This terrible sea of grief, owing its origin to Manthara, containing its ferocious aquatic animal in the shape of Kaikeyi, and incapable of being disturbed in consequence of the bestowal of the boon, drowns us. O father, where hast thou gone, leaving the tender and youthful Bharata fondled by thee, to lament thy loss? Thou didst use to confer on us eatables and drinkables and attires and ornaments. Who will now do so? Deprived of thee, the high-souled king, cognizant of duty, the earth, albeit her time of riving is come, is not yet riven. My father having gone to heaven and Rama having sought the woods, how can I live? I will enter fire. Bereft of my brother and sire, I will not enter the empty Ayodhya governed by the Ikshvakus. I will repair to the forest of asceticism. Hearing his lamentations and seeing that disaster, all the followers became all the more distressed. Then, depressed and exhausted, both Satrughna and Bharata rolled on the earth like two bulls with their horns fractured. Then the all-knowing priest of their father, possessed of sterling worth, Vasishtha, raising Bharata, said unto him, O Lord, this is the 13th day since the cremation of thy sire. Why dost thou delay, when thou hast to collect the bones? Three couples pertain in especial to all creatures, and these being inevitable, thou ought not to bear yourself thus. And Sumantra, also versed in the nature of things, raising up Satrugna and pacifying him, discoursed the birth and death of all beings. Being raised up, those renowned chiefs of men looked like Indra's banner stained by shine and shower. And as the princes stood there shedding tears, with reddened eyes, and speaking sadly, the courtiers urged them on in behalf of the rights that remained. Section 78. Then Satrugna, the younger brother of Lakshmana, spoke unto Bharata, burning in grief as he was revolving in his mind the intended journey to Rama. Need it be said that Rama is the refuge both of himself and all creatures in trouble? That Rama, possessed of strength, hath been exiled into the woods by a woman, and powerful and having prowess, why did not Lakshmana deliver Rama by checking our father? The king bent upon following an unrighteous course through the influence of a woman, should the justice or otherwise of the measure being fully weighed, at the very outset have been checked. As Lakshmana's younger brother, Satrugna was speaking thus, appeared there at the door in front the humpbacked one, adorned with every kind of ornament, with her body besmeared with sandal paste, wearing regal apparel, and variously decked out with a variety of ornaments, and adorned with elegant zones, and divers other superb ornaments. She looked like a female monkey tethered with a rope. At that time, seeing that one of horrible misdeeds, Bharata, who stood near the door, seizing the humpbacked one ruthlessly, took her unto Satrugna, and said, that one through whom Rama has gone to the wood and our father has renounced his body, this is that wicked and remorseless one. Do thou deal with her as thou likest. At Bharata's command, Satrugna, observing, was waxing exceedingly aggrieved, addressed all the inmates of the inner apartment, saying, This one has occasioned intense misery unto my father and brothers. Let her now take the fruit of her fell deed. Having said this, he furiously fell upon the humpbacked one surrounded by her maids. Thereupon she, with her cries, made the chamber resound. Concluding, Satrugna, fired with rage, her associates extremely pained, fled away in all directions. Then her companions in a body took counsel of each other, saying, Considering the way in which he has entered upon it, he will annihilate us quite. Let us therefore seek the protection of the tender-hearted, generous, pious and illustrious Kausalya. Even she is our sure refuge. Overpowered with rage, that chastiser of foes, Satrugna, dragged the shrieking humpbacked one to the ground. As Manthara was pushed this way and that, her various ornaments were scattered over the floor, and strewn with those ornaments, the graceful chamber of the palace looked like the autumnal firmament. And that foremost of men, possessed of strength, holding her, began to reprove Kaikeyi with harsh speech. Extremely hurt by those rough words, Kaikeyi, terrified on account of Satrugna, took refuge with her son. Thereupon, casting his eyes on Satrugna, Bharata said, A woman is incapable of being slain by any. Do thou therefore excuse her. I myself would have slain this wicked Kaikeyi of impious deeds, if the righteous Rama should not be displeased with me on account of my slaying my mother. And if Raghava knows that the humpbacked one hath been slain, he surely will speak neither with thee nor me. Hearing Bharata's words, Satrugna, younger brother unto Lakshmana, refrained from that wrong and set free the humpbacked woman in a swoon. Thereat, sighing hard in exceeding grief, Manthara flung herself at Kaikeyi's feet, weeping piteously. Seeing the hump-backed one deprived of her senses in consequence of the pushing she had received at the hands of Satrugna, Bharata's mother consoled that distressed woman, who appeared like a crunchy that had been entrapped. Section 79. Then on the morning of the 14th day, the ministers of the king assembled, addressed Bharata in the following words: having exiled his eldest son and the exceedingly strong Lakshmana, Dasaratha, who was the superior of our superiors, hath gone to heaven. Do thou, therefore, O illustrious prince, become our king. Having been permitted by the king, thou wilt commit no fault by doing so, as this kingdom is without a master. O Raghava, having procured all these necessaries for the installation, the councillors and others as well as the citizens wait, O king's son. Do thou, O Bharata, take charge of this secure kingdom bequeathed by thy father and grandfather. Do thou, O foremost of men, have thyself sprinkled, and rule over us. Thereupon, having gone round all the things procured for the sprinkling, Bharata firm in his voice addressed those persons, saying, in our line it is ever fit for the firstborn alone to perform the task of government. It doth not behove ye who are wise to say so unto me. Certainly, Rama our eldest brother shall become the king, and I will abide in the forest for 5 and 9 years. Do ye array the grand and mighty army consisting of fourfold forces. I will bring back from the forest my eldest brother Raghava, and taking all these necessaries for the investiture in front, I will go in the direction of the forest for Rama, and sprinkling that chief of men on the spot, I will placing him in our front, bring Rama back, like unto fire brought in from the sacrifice. I will never fulfill the desire of this lady proud of her son. I will inhabit the impracticable woods, and Rama shall become the monarch. Let workmen lay out level roads in uneven tracts, and let those men that are adepts in treading places difficult to pass through, follow us. When the prince had spoken thus in behalf of Rama, all those persons answered him in these excellent words, for saying this, may Lakshmi seated on the lotus remain at thy side, inasmuch as thou wishest to confer the earth on the eldest son of the monarch. Hearing that graceful speech of the king's son, teardrops, begot of delight began to trickle from their eyes and adorned those noble countenances. And their grief removed, with cheerful hearts, the councillors, courtiers, and others hearing that speech of the prince, said, O best of men, according to thy order, artisans as well as people cherishing a high regard for thee have been directed to lay out a road. Section 80. Then set out in advance, persons having a knowledge of the humidity or otherwise of the soil, men skilled in making tents, brave delvers engaged in their proper work, those capable of constructing canals and water courses, people on pay, car makers, men preparing machines, carpenters, those intended to guard the ways, pioneers, cooks, perfumers, makers of wickerware and able guides. And as the mighty throng began to proceed, it resembled the swell of the sea on the occasion of a purva. And numbers of men skilled in road constructing went before, or furnished with various implements, and hewing away boughs, and plants and shrubs and woody projections, stones, and divers trees, they went on preparing a road. And they set up trees where there were none, and at places they felled trees by means of axes, tankas, and das, others possessed of greater strength and more powerful, with their hands uprooted masses of virana and here and there leveled the rising ground. And others filled up with dust wells and capacious hollows, and speedily leveled deep places all around. And those men threw bridges wherever they became necessary, and broke the earth wherever such a process was required, and excavated whenever it was necessary. In a short time, they made places poor of water overflow with many and various expanses resembling the ocean, and in tracts void of water, they digged divers receptacles of water, decorated with daces. And the way of the army, furnished with pavements of bricks and clay, with trees bearing blossoms, eloquent with the tunes of birds, decorated with pennons, sprinkled with sandal showers, and garnished with flowers of various kinds, looked exceedingly beautiful, like unto the way of the celestials. Then having received the command of Bharata, the men that were in charge of the tents, ordered the workmen to pitch the tents, and when they had been pitched at a romantic spot filled with tasteful fruits, in consonance with the injunction of the high-souled Bharata, the men decorated splendidly the tents which themselves were like the ornaments of the road. And under an auspicious star and at a favorable hour, men well up in the work set the encampment of the high-souled Bharata, and the tents surrounded by an entrenchment paved with dust, containing images made of sapphires, graced with goodly thoroughfares, lined with edifices, encircled by towers and walls, decorated with streamers, having well-made highways, and appearing like celestial daces and containing stately mansions with dovecotes, resembled the metropolis of Sakra himself. And passing by the Jahnavi abounding in various trees and woods, of cool and crystal waters, and filled with mighty fishes, that way of the chief of men constructed by artisans, looked more and more lovely as it proceeded, as the unclouded sky looks beautiful at night, adorned with innumerable stars. Section 81. When seeing that the night, in which had been performed the auspicious preliminary ceremonies, was about to be spent, eulogists and genealogists hymned Bharata with concherated hymns. And then sounded the kettle drum, beaten by a golden stick, announcing the departure of the night, and people sounded gongs and other instruments by hundreds furnished with soft and loud sounds. And as if filling the heavens, those powerful blasts of the trumpet repeatedly rendered Bharata burning in grief the more aggrieved. Then awaking and silencing those sounds with saying, I am not the king, he said unto Satrughna, Behold, O Satrughna, in what a mighty wrong the people are engaged, on account of Kaikeyi. The king Dasaratha has gone away throwing down on me the burthen of this misery. The royal grace founded in righteousness of that magnanimous and virtuous monarch is wandering even like a boat on water having no helmsman. And he who is our mighty master hath been banished into the woods by this mother of mine, who had, in doing so, renounced virtue. Seeing Bharata lamenting thus senseless, the ladies afflicted with sorrow began to wail in winsome accents. As Bharata was mourning thus, the highly famous and virtuous Vasishtha accompanied by his disciples entered the court of the Ikshvaku king, built of entire gold, charming, dazzling with gems and gold, like unto Sudama itself. Sitting down on a golden seat furnished with an elegant cover, that one versed in all the Vedas commanded the envoys, saying, Do ye speedily with collected minds bring hither Brahmanas and Kshatriyas and warriors and counselors and generals of forces and Satrughna with the other princes, and the famous Bharata and Yudhajit and Sumantra and others that are engaged in our welfare. Then there arose a mighty hubbub occasioned by people coming up in cars, horses and elephants. And when Bharata arrived, the subjects rejoiced as they used to rejoice on Dasaratha's arrival, and as rejoiced the immortals on the arrival of him of 100 sacrifices. And then the court, resembling a moveless ocean containing whales and serpents, and gems and conchs and gold mines, being graced with the presence of the Dasaratha's son, looked splendid as it formerly did with that of the Dasaratha himself. Section 82. And then the intelligent Bharata surveyed that assembly filled with noble and worthy personages, resembling the night of the full moon. And that august assembly was ablaze with the brilliant hues proceeding from the attires of the honorable persons seated according to rank. And that splendid assembly filled with learned people looked like the night of the full moon after the clouds have dispersed. And seeing all the subjects of the sovereign gathered together, the priest cognizant of virtue softly spoke unto Bharata, "My child, leaving unto thee this prosperous earth abounding in corn and wealth, King Dasaratha having performed his duties, hath gone to heaven. And Rama of truthful character observing the virtue of the righteous hath not set aside his father's commands, even as the risen moon doth not renounce the moonlight. Loved by the courtiers, do thou, having been installed, enjoy this kingdom conferred on thee by thy father and mother, rid of its thorn. Let princes, throned as well as those without thrones, from east and west, north and south, and also persons ranging the sea, procure countless gems for presenting them unto thee." Hearing this speech, Bharata, cognizant of virtue, filled with sorrow, mentally repaired to Rama desirous of reaping merit. Then in words choked with the melodious voice of a swan, lamented and taxed the priest, in the midst of the assembly, "Who like myself ever deprives one that hath led a brahmacharya mode of life, that is endowed with understanding and performed his bath after having acquired learning, and that is always intent on righteousness, of one's kingdom? How begot of Dasaratha, shall I deprive Rama of his kingdom? It behoveth thee to speak righteousness before this assembly. Firstborn, and foremost in merit, righteous soul, and comparable unto Dilipa and Nahusha, Kakutstha deserves the kingdom, just as Dasaratha did. If I commit myself to this sin, dishonorable and calculated to bring me to perdition, I shall in this world bring disgrace on the race of the Ikshvakus. I do not at all relish the sin that has been committed by my mother. Remaining here with joined hands I bow down unto Rama, gone to the forest fastness. I will follow Rama. That best of men is the king. Raghava deserves the dominion of the three worlds themselves." Hearing those words informed with righteousness, the entire assembly with their minds intent upon Rama, from joy shed tears. "If I fail to bring back the noble one from the forest, I will like the exalted Lakshmana remain even in that forest. I will in presence of this mixed assembly of pious and honorable persons following every perfection, adopt every expedient to bring back Rama. I have already dispatched beforehand persons serving for love as well as those for money, and layers of roads and their keepers, and I intend setting out now." Having said this, the virtuous Bharata attached unto his brother spoke to Sumantra skilled in counsel, who was by, saying, "Up, and go, O Sumantra! At my command. Do thou make known this journey and bring the forces." Thus accosted by the magnanimous Bharata, Sumantra with a cheerful heart issued orders concerning everything desirable as he was ordered. Hearing that the army had been ordered to march forth for bringing back Rama, the subjects as well as the generals of the forces became exceedingly delighted. Hearing of the journey to Rama, for bringing him back, the wives of the soldiers apprised of the order that had been issued to the latter, being exceedingly delighted, hurried on. And the generals expeditiously dispatched their forces with warriors by means of horses and carts and cars fleet as the mind. Seeing those forces marshalled, Bharata staying near his preceptor, said unto Sumantra who was at his side, "Do thou speedily bring my car." In obedience to the mandate of Bharata, Sumantra exceedingly rejoiced, appeared with the car yoked with superb steeds. Then that powerful descendant of Raghu of truthful character, and having unswerving truth for his prowess, Bharata, having said what was fit, spoke words calculated to gladden his illustrious superior gone to the mighty forest. O Sumantra, arise thou speedily and, thy desire fully attained, go by my command, and tell the chiefs of the army, and our principal adherents to array the forces, thereat rising, Rayanyas and Vashyas, and Vrishalas, and Vipras in every house began to yoke camels, and cars and mules and elephants and excellent steeds. Section 83. Rising with the morrow, Bharata, anxious to behold Rama, speedily set out ascending an excellent car. Before him went the counsellors and priests, ascending cars resembling that of the sun yoked with steeds. And 1,000 elephants duly consecrated went in the wake of that son of the Ikshvaku line as he was proceeding. And 6,000 cars with bowmen furnished with various weapons followed the illustrious Prince Bharata as he was proceeding. And 100,000 horses mounted by riders went in the wake of that descendant of Raghu, intent upon truth and having his senses under control. And Kaikeyi and Sumitra and the highly famous Kausalya, rejoicing at the prospect of the bringing of Rama, went in an effulgent car. And the honorable persons, belonging to all the three orders, went with the object of beholding Rama in company with Lakshmana. And they with glad hearts variously conversed with each other, when shall we see the mighty armed Rama sable like unto a cloud, of steady strength, firm in woes, the remover of the world's grief. As soon as we shall see him, Raghava will remove our sorrow, even as the sun arising dispels the darkness of the entire world. Thus cheerfully carrying on an auspicious talk, the citizens embracing each other went along. And all others, and the foremost merchants as well as all the principal classes, joyfully went in quest of Rama. And a number of game-cutters, and goodly potters, weavers, and armorers, and peacock dancers, salvers, and perforators of gems, glassmakers, and workers in ivory, cooks, incense sellers, well-known goldsmiths, and wool manufacturers, bathers in tepid water, shampooers, physicians, makers of dhupas, and wine sellers, washermen, and tailors, and actors in numbers with females, and kaivartas, and persons versed in Vedas having their minds in control, and brahmanas of reputed character, and persons well dressed and attired in pure habits, with their bodies daubed with coppery unguents, by thousands followed Bharata on carts. All these gradually followed Bharata by means of excellent vehicles. And the army delighted and in high spirits went in the wake of Kaikeyi's son attached unto his brother, going to bring back his brother. Going far by means of cars, vehicles, elephants, and horses, they arrived at the Ganga near Shringavrapura, where was peacefully staying that friend of Rama, the heroic Guha, surrounded by his relatives, ruling the realm. Having come to the banks of the Ganga graced with Chakravakas, the army which was following Bharata halted. Seeing the army inactive, as well as the Ganga of sacred waters, Bharata versed in speech spoke unto the courtiers, "Do you communicating unto all our intentions, encamp the army. Having been fatigued, we shall cross the ocean going Ganga on the morrow. Having crossed the stream, I am anxious to offer its water unto the monarch, who has gone to heaven, in behalf of his spiritual body." When he had said this, the courtiers with collected minds saying, "Be it so," disposed their forces, each according to his wish. Having on the mighty stream Ganga quartered his forces furnished with all appliances for the journey, Bharata remained there, revolving the means of making the high-souled Rama turn back. Section 84. Seeing the forces, with banners flying quartered on the banks of the river Ganga, and engaged in various occupations, the lord of the Nishdas, Guha, said unto his relatives ranged around, "This mighty host here appeareth like an ocean. I do not find its end even by thinking of it in my mind. Surely the foolish Bharata hath come hither himself, on his car appears the huge Govidara banner. Belike, he will either bind us by nooses or slay us." And next Dasaratha's son, Rama, banished from the kingdom by his sire, desirous of taking complete possession of the rare regal fortune of that sovereign Rama, Kaikeyi's son, Bharata, comes to destroy him. Rama, the son of Dasaratha, is both my maintainer and friend. Do ye in his interests, donning on your mail, wait on the banks of the river, and stationed on the river Ganga, let my powerful retainers subsisting on fruits and roots and meat, be prepared for opposing Bharata's passage over the river. And let hundreds upon hundreds of Kaivarta youths accoutred in mail remain in each of 500 barks. Guha issued this order. But if Bharata be well disposed towards Rama, this host shall today safely cross the Ganga. Having said this, the lord of the Nishdas, Guha, taking a present of flesh, fish and honey, went out for interviewing Bharata. Seeing Guha approaching, the powerful son of the charioteer, knowing season, humbly informed Bharata of it, saying, "This lord that approaches, surrounded by his relatives, is very potent in Dandaka and is an old friend of your brother. Therefore let Guha, the lord of the Nishdas, see you, O Kakutstha. He indubitably knows where Rama and Lakshmana are." Hearing these wise words of Sumantra, Bharata at once said, "Let Guha see me." Receiving permission, Guha, right glad, appeared before Bharata, bending low, and said, "This place is thy home. But thou hast stolen a march over us. We dedicate all this unto thee. Do thou reside in the abode of thy servant. Here are fruits and roots gathered by the Nishdas and meat dry and moist and various other produces of the forest. I pray that entertained in various ways and heartily partaking of meats and drinks, this army may spend the night here. Tomorrow morning, thou wilt go along with thy forces." Section 85. Thus addressed, the exceedingly wise Bharata answered the lord of the Nishdas, in words fraught with sense and reason, "Thy great desire, O friend of my superior, is surely as good as attained, since thou of mighty energy hast set thy heart on entertaining my army." Having said these fair words unto Guha, the graceful and highly energetic Bharata again addressed the lord of Nishdas, "By what way shall I go to Bharadwaja's hermitage? These lands watered by the Ganga are dense and hard to track." Hearing these words of the intelligent son of the king, Guha, well acquainted with the forest, said with joined hands, "My servant, well acquainted with the place, shall attentively follow thee, and, O prince possessed of mighty strength, I myself will also walk in thy wake. But dost thou go after Rama of energetic acts with some evil intention? This vast force of thine raiseth my apprehension." When Guha had asked this, Bharata with a presence unclouded like the sky, spoke unto Guha these sweet words, "May a time never come when I shall do wrong unto Raghava. It behoveth thee not to fear me. Raghava is my eldest brother, dear unto me even as my sire himself. I go to make Kakutstha dwelling in the woods, turn back. Other intention cherish I none. O Guha, this I tell thee truly. Having heard Bharata's speech, Guha with a countenance lighted up with delight, again cheerfully addressed Bharata, saying, Blessed art thou. Thy like, find I none on earth, inasmuch as thou wishest to resign a kingdom that comes to thee without search. Thy eternal fame will certainly range this world, since thou wishest to bring back Rama, passing through misfortune. As Guha was speaking thus unto Bharata, the sun became shorn of his splendor and night fell. Thereupon, having disposed his troops, the auspicious Bharata, gratified by Guha, went to bed along with Satrughna. Then arose thoughts of Rama in the mind of the magnanimous Bharata, ever having his gaze fixed on virtue and undeserving of hardship. Then even as a tree already heated by a forest fire burns with a fire hidden in its cavity, that descendant of Raghu began to burn with the fire of grief inflamed in his heart. And perspiration produced by the fire of sorrow issued out of all his limbs, as the Himamvat heated by the solar warmth generates water. And Kaikeyi's son was overpowered and drowned by the mountain of grief, having thoughts of Rama for its entire crags, sighs for its mineral substance, disgust with the avocations of life, for its trees, mental feebleness through grief for its summits, stupor for the animals inhabiting it, and burning for its annual shrubs and bamboos. And sighing heavily, with a heart oppressed with sorrow, well nigh deprived of consciousness, and involved in high peril, that best of men, oppressed by the fever of his heart, like unto a mighty leader of a herd, separated from it, did not attain peace of mind. Meeting with Guha, the magnanimous Bharata, accompanied by his people, engrossed with the thoughts of Rama, became oppressed with grief. Seeing this, Guha by and by encouraged Bharata concerning his elder brother. Section 86. Guha, acquainted with the forest, described unto Bharata, of immeasurable prowess, the regard the high-souled Lakshmana bore unto Rama. To Lakshmana, crowned with every virtue, waking up, holding the bow with the arrow fixed on it for the purpose of guarding well his brother, I said, This easeful bed has been prepared for thee, my child. O son of Raghu's descendant, cheer up. Do thou lie down at ease. All these people can bear hardship, but thou art meant for comfort. For protecting him religiously, we shall wake. To me also there is none that is dearer on earth than Rama. Do not be anxious. This I tell thee truly, through his grace I expect high fame among men, and immense religious merit, and interest and desire in entirety. Bow in hand I shall, along with my kin, protect Rama lying down with Sita. To me always ranging in this forest, nothing whatever is unknown. I can even cope in battle with an army of fourfold forces. Thus accosted by us, the magnanimous Lakshmana with his gaze ever fixed on virtue, humbly observed, how, Dasaratha's son sleeping on the earth with Sita, can I attain sleep, or life, or happiness? How see him who is capable of bearing in battle the onslaught of the gods and the asuras combined, sleeping in a cave on grass? It is by virtue of mighty austerities and uncommon exertions that Dasaratha has obtained this son of his, crowned with every auspicious sign. He being banished, the king shall not live long, and the earth shall certainly be widowed soon. Having bewailed aloud, by this time have the women got exhausted, and surely the king's mansion is today still. I do not expect that either Kausalya or the king or my mother is alive. If they leave, it can be for this night only. Even if my mother leave seeing Satrugna, that mother of a hero, the afflicted Kausalya, will surely resign her existence, saying all is lost, with his desire unattained, my father having failed to install Rama in the kingdom, will resign his existence. Blessed are they that, when the time shall come for the same, shall perform the funeral ceremonies of the king, my deceased sire. Then shall they with happy hearts range the metropolis of my father, furnished with fair-looking terraces, with the highways laid out orderly, crowned with lordly edifices, adorned with various gems, crowded by cars and elephants and horses, resounding with the notes of trumpets, abounding in auspicious things, filled with fat and contented people, having gardens and pleasure houses, and possessed of divers classes of men indulging festal mirth. Shall we, on the occasion of Rama's return, with glad hearts peacefully enter the city in company with that one firm in his promise? As the magnanimous son of the king was thus lamenting, the night passed away. In the morning, with an unclouded sun, both, having made matted locks on the banks of the Bhagirathi, crossed the river along with me, wearing matted locks and clad in barks of trees, those persons possessed of mighty strength, like unto leaders of elephant herds, equipped with excellent arrows and quivers and bows, those repressors of foes, expecting their return from exile, departed with Sita. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.